People don't realize what a critical time that we are living in. And the stories that are coming out is showing you that things are not going so smoothly in this world. The UN chief has recently came out talking about nuclear war. So nuclear war risk highest since World War II. UN arms research chief warns. A top security expert at the United Nations has warned that the risk of nuclear weapons could be used as its highest since World War II, calling it an urgent issue that the world should be more take more seriously. Speaking to reporters in the Swiss city of Geneva on Tuesday, Renata Dwan, director of the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, said the arms control landscape was changing partly due to strategic competition between the United States and China, and noted that all states with nuclear weapons have nuclear modernization programs underway. Traditional arm control arrangements were also being eroded by the emergence of different types of war, with an increasing prevalence of armed groups and private sector forces and new technologies that blurred the line between offense and defense, Dwan said. With disarmament talk at a stalemate for the past 2 decades, 122 countries have signed a treaty to ban nuclear weapons, partly out of frustration and partly out of recognition of the risk, she said. I think that it's genuinely a call to recognize, and this has been somewhat missing in the media coverage of the issues, that the risk of nuclear war are particularly high now, and the risk of the use of nuclear weapons for some of the factor I point out are higher now than any time since World War II. And there's a video here, and I'm going to go ahead and play it.
First, the United States, now Russia, both walk away from a treaty that's helped prevent nuclear war for more than 30 years. What will this mean for the arms race? And does it make the world a more dangerous place? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine Dennis. Now, a treaty that's helped to keep the world safe from nuclear war appears to be falling apart. The United States withdrew from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF, on Friday, accusing Russia of violating it. Moscow has now followed suit. President Putin denies breaking the deal and says Russia will start developing new missiles. We'll introduce our guests in just a moment. First, though, let's hear from the two presidents.
Our American partners stated they will stop their participation in the treaty, so we will also stop. They stated that they will do research and development of arms, so we will also do the same. Russia won't deploy new land-based short-range and intermediate-range weapons neither in Europe nor in other regions of the world, unless similar American-made weapons appear in those regions. All our proposals in this sphere remain on the table as before. Doors for talks are open. At the same time, I'm asking the Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry not to initiate any talks on this issue. Let's wait until our partners open a dialogue with us.
First of all, you have to add countries, obviously, it's old. But very importantly, one side has not been adhering to it. We have, but one side hasn't. So unless they're going to adhere, we shouldn't be the only one. I hope that we're able to get everybody in a very big and beautiful room and do a new treaty that would be much better.
Well, Alex Kotopoulos has more on what the withdrawals will mean.
The world has changed dramatically since the signing of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, or INF, in 1987. Designed as a confidence-building measure to reduce the possibility of nuclear war, the treaty helped guarantee peace between the two Cold War rivals, the then Soviet Union and the United States. But 18 years after the Cold War ended, nuclear missile technology has spread far and wide. So who has this technology? China and North Korea have demonstrated their ability to build increasingly sophisticated missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads further and further. India and its rival, Pakistan, have also been developing missiles that can strike their enemy with improved accuracy. The US and Russia believe the INF Treaty has held them back from developing increasingly potent weapons. So by pulling out and with fewer constraints, there could now be a new phase in the arms race. And if the atmosphere of mistrust continues, it could have a negative effect on other arms treaties, like the new Strategic Arms Reduction or START agreement that's due for renewal in 2021.
All right, let's introduce our guests now. We start with Pavel Felgenhauer, who's in Moscow. He's a defense and military analyst in Washington, D.C. We have Mark Fitzpatrick, who's director of the Non-Proliferation Program at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. And in Brussels, we have Leo Hoffman from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN. Welcome to you all. Let's start with you, Pavel. The Russians have been accused by President Trump, by the United States, for breaching this agreement. What have they done wrong?
Well, Russia has been basically adopting the cruise missiles it has developed for ships and submarines to be launched from land launchers from a modified Iskander launcher, which basically to begin with was capable of using as ballistic and cruise missiles. That makes a lot of military and economic sense because deploying the same more or less long-range cruise missile on a land launcher, or basically a truck, it's 10 to 20 times cheaper than on building a frigate and deploying on a frigate.
Right.
And trucks are actually easier to hide. And that's most likely what the Russian military were doing. And though the deployment actually was not very large in numbers and could have been officiated by the Russian authorities as a response to the US deploying missile defense systems in Romania and Poland, which Russia believes are actually also first attack weapon systems that could use long-range American cruise. The Americans deny that.
Okay, you've given me a long list of Russian activity.
Yes.
What was in contravention then of the INF? If you could be brief, please. Sorry.
Well,
Pavel.
what the Americans say is that these missiles were tested for a range of over 500 kilometers, which they should not. Russia says that it did test for more than 500 kilometers, but that was for naval missiles, not for land-based. But for land-based, we say we have them, but they are for a shorter range. The problem with cruise missiles is that their range depends on how much fuel you have on board, and that's very hard to verify.
All right, let's go to Mark in Washington, who was agreeing with you on that long inventory of Russian hardware and activity. Mark, it seems like a situation of quid pro quo, though, doesn't it? The Americans have been quibbling over this INF treaty, haven't they, for 5 years, if not more? Finally, the Trump administration pulls out or announces that it's pulling out, suspending its membership, and then the Russians follow suit. So who's at fault here?
So I think you've characterized it very well. Russia is at fault initially for testing a ground-launched cruise missile that exceeded the INF limits at the lower end. It was over 500 kilometers. I think Pavel explained well the differences among the systems. And the United States has been trying for 5 years to persuade Russia to come back into compliance. Now, the Trump administration, I think, made a huge mistake in pulling out of the treaty altogether. They didn't need to do that. They could have kept up pressure on Russia, applied penalties in other ways, and stayed in the treaty. And now, Russia pulling out altogether, it's a breakdown of arms control. It's a breakdown of trust between the United States and Russia. The United States will have problems with its European allies, and it will engage in a new arms race with China as well. So there's nothing good comes out of the United States withdrawal.
All right. And Leo in Brussels, I mean, this was a rather whiskery agreement, wasn't it? Over 30 years old, as Alex, our correspondent earlier pointed out. I mean, the global military landscape is dramatically altered. So perhaps it had served its time. It needed a complete reboot anyway.
Well, clearly, we're not in a situation where we can say, well, we can do away with now the bilateral or multilateral disarmament and arms control treaties. Clearly, we're in a situation, especially here in Europe, this has been felt in the last years, where there's more confrontation and especially an uptick in military and rhetoric around nuclear weapons. And the more you threaten nuclear weapons, the higher the likelihood, of course, that that becomes a reality, and nuclear weapons will once again be used. So, as has been said, there's nothing positive that comes from this development. And now I think the important part is not so much to point fingers, figure out who is to blame, who cheated on the treaty first. I think there's claims and counterclaims. Both Trump and Putin have very low credibility on these issues. They have both not made public their detailed allegations and their detailed defenses on whether or not they breached this treaty. And from the perspective of all the other states in the world, so taking a step back from just Russia and just the United States, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, are something that is extremely important for all states in the world. Everybody stands to suffer the catastrophic consequences from any use of these weapons of mass destruction. And therefore, the important question is, what can the rest of the world do in order to reduce the likelihood that nuclear weapons will be used again? And so, of course, luckily, we haven't been idle. So the majority of nations in the world has in 2017 come together to adopt a new treaty in the United Nations called the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. That, of course, makes nuclear weapons illegal. And now states should, as fast as possible, sign and ratify this treaty in order to send a clear message to the handful of nuclear weapon states that we can no longer tolerate that they are putting our lives at risk with their pursuit of nuclear weapons and nuclear deterrence.
All right, y'all. I mean, this interview is actually 25 minutes long, but I'm going to stop right here. So you have a general idea of some of the critical things that are going on when it comes down to nuclear weapons right now. So please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. This stuff is coming up for a reason, and we have to go through these wars in order to go to the next level. The people right now that are in charge, they are not the ones to take this world to the next level. If you leave them in charge, we'll just get 1,000 more years of racism. That's all you'll get. They're not going to take us to another level because they're not even evolving. So it's a matter of now looking at the future in a whole different way, and doing more for ourselves. That's really the key to the whole thing. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.